Today I'm working with fluid art, which means I'm going to be working with a lot of very wet paint. It can get very messy. So I have a tray here to help keep down the mess. I have a canvas, I have gloves to help keep the mess down, and I have a plastic cup that's going to help me with this project. I also have some paints here. I got these online. You don't actually have to do that. You can get some less expensive paints. I'll go over that when I get some time here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my canvas, because if a lot of people are doing this project, you may not be able to tell yours the next day. And we all want to have our own work and not someone else's. So I'm marking this, and I'm going to mark it on the inside of the stretcher bar too, just to give it an idea that maybe the paint will get on the back and cover that, and if it does, I don't want it to be unrecognizable. So I'm going to take this tray, set it aside, and I'm going to pull out some paints and we'll take a look at them. Now these are 2-ounce bottles, but in the corner here I have something called Cell Magic. It's basically silicone. Pretty much anything off the shelf that's mostly silicone is going to do the same thing, and that's going to help a little bit with our artwork later, and I'll point some of that out to you when we get there. Also in this box are many 2-ounce bottles of brightly colored acrylic paint. Now these are very similar to craft paints. As a matter of fact, they're pretty much identical, and they are thinner than you will find acrylic paint in a tube. Now I got these paints in this format because they are made specifically for pouring, and they are the proper consistency. I don't have to worry about checking the thickness of my paint. If my paint is too thick to flow, it's going to create textures that I don't want, and it's going to impede the mixing of the paints that I want to see. If I do have paints that are too thick, which these aren't, I would add a pouring medium, which is basically just a thin acrylic medium that would help stretch the paint farther and make it pour better. The next thing that you're going to see here is that there's a pretty good plastic cap inside that needs to be removed from each of these paints before I can actually use it effectively. So I'm going to do that on all of these. Now just pouring the paint will cause it to swirl and do all sorts of stuff, but to give it what we call cells, I want to put a little bit of silicone in some of these paints, and those are going to be sort of bubbles that come through. It's going to keep the paint from mixing too quickly with each other and give it more of a blotchy look in some areas. So I'm putting silicone into some of these. You'll see it's about a teaspoon to a half a teaspoon for a 2-ounce bottle, and I'm just going to put it on there. I'm going to shake it a little bit, not a whole lot. I want it to be uneven, and you can see that I've had a color substitution here that is going to change a little bit the outlook of what the colors are going to do, but really the picture in the end is quite random. Also remember that this is basically silicone, so other silicone products will do the same thing. Now you may have been keeping track. I didn't put silicone in all of these, just many of them. And now I'm going to start putting my paint together here for a pour. And to do that, I want to put, maybe half an ounce or up to an ounce of a color in here at a time. I can put small amounts, I can put large amounts. I'm just filling the cup with paint. I'm not mixing it, I'm letting gravity do that to some extent, but I'm not going to encourage the mixing at this point. Now this cup is a little bit larger than what I need. The basic formula is I should have 1 ounce per 25 square inches, which gives me about 6 ounces. But in truth, it's really closer to 1 ounce per 30 square inches. So I really only need about 5. And this is a 5.5 ounce cup. So I think I've got a little bit more than I need here. I move the canvas more central so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to put on these gloves. They're not always necessary. I'm not wearing a smock or anything right now, but this can get messy. So this is just to show you that we do take some precaution to try to keep it off of things. And if I get my fingers in it, I just want to be able to take the glove off and throw it away. You can see here that I'm not actually pouring the paint. This is a cup flip. And I put the cup on the face of the canvas, then I turn it over and just pick up the cup and watch it spread. And you can see the colors are going crazy there. And I'm letting some of the paint drip out of the cup. They haven't really blended a whole lot. And the more brighter colors you get, the more interesting it may be. Now I'm going to swirl it around, and I'm using inertia and gravity to sort of hit the edges of the canvas because I want it to go all the way around the outside edge and across the corners. The first thing I'm doing is I'm twisting and tilting it so that I can get it all across the face of the canvas. And then I'm going to get the edges, and if I miss any parts along the edge, I can always dip my finger with the glove on, of course, into the paint and patch those little holes. At this point, it's about done. Sometimes I drip a little bit of extra paint on there. If it didn't cover the whole canvas, I could put some more paint on there. I don't encourage it to mix, and the wider range of colors that we use, the more likely we are to get things like browns, etc. So I don't want to encourage the mixing, because the more mixing you get, the more homogeneous it becomes. You can see a couple of rounded areas sort of popping up, one paint coming through another. Those are the cells that I mentioned earlier that the silicone encourages. You can use fire to heat up areas like a blowtorch. You can drag things through it. There are many, many different techniques. You don't have to use the cup like I did to flip it. You can actually pour the paints directly on the surface. There are just so many different techniques you might want to look up on the internet. This is the bare bones of fluid art. Now this picture will continue to flow for quite a while it's drying, so this is about 20 minutes later what it looks like. By changing your colors, your techniques, and the consistency of the paint, you can get all sorts of different types of effects. They may look like space nebula or landscapes or all sorts of things. I like to look at pictures like this and see what I can find, like looking at shapes in the clouds. I usually like to use something like this as part of a picture and not the entire picture itself. The randomness is kind of artful and artless at the same time. But if I can use some of these colors and these combinations in the space in my picture, whether it's positive or negative, I can see all sorts of different possibilities. It leads me to wonder what other possibilities people might see in these. Here's a silhouette, positive and negative space separation using different techniques. You can see that the flip cup pour is in the positive space, not the negative. And yet it gives that positive space a feeling of being a whole or negative space in the canvas. I'm going to finish up here by showing you the whole thing over again using apple barrel paints from Walmart, a little bit of Liquitex pouring medium, and WD-40 silicone, and I'm going to make a background for a space scene with a nebula just by changing up the colors. You can see that I don't have the tray here, so it's quite a bit of a mess, but as long as I keep it contained right underneath, I can throw out whatever drop cloth I have there or let it dry on that.